As age begins to catch up on the first generation of superheroes, their children need to step up and take charge. But with supervillains who are now capable of killing the heroes, the younger generation begins to question the value that their parents upheld above all else: never to kill under any circumstance. But when the utopian's son kills a supervillain, the union of heroes is split in half between those who believe that he was in the right to do so, and those who believe that the code must be upheld at all cost. Now, I've never really been a fan of comic books and superheroes. Most of my knowledge on them comes from watching the Marvel and DC films. Other than that, I've only really read about one comic before, so I wasn't really too sure what to expect with Jupiter's Legacy. The main plot revolves around the Samson family. Sheldon is the Utopian, leader of the Union of Heroes, and the one who came up with the code of never killing. He is struggling to maintain order amongst the heroes, who are beginning to believe that the code holds them back and puts their lives in greater danger. Sheldon has 2 children. His daughter Chloe has turned her back on the superhero business, and instead lives life as a model. She has also developed a drug addiction, and hates her father for being the Utopian. Sheldon's son, Brandon, aspires to become the Utopian in the future and take over the mantle from his father. However, Sheldon feels like his son will never be ready for this responsibility. Meanwhile, Grace tries to keep the family together, but struggles to keep in contact with Chloe and help Brandon and Sheldon understand each other's points of view. I will say that this series had a very promising start. The costumes worn by the heroes and villains are very vibrant and reminiscent of the classic costumes worn by DC and Marvel heroes. However, the powers that these heroes possess are fairly generic, mostly consisting of flight, super strength, laser eyes, and vague energy powers. While this may look like a superhero show on the surface, it's less concerned about supervillain attacks, and instead chooses to focus on a world where these heroes live by a code of no killing, and what could happen if they break that code. If you like superheroes for all the cool action and fight sequences, then you will be disappointed. These sequences do not occur very often, and when they do, there's nothing really special about them. This leaves the show carried by its premise of asking whether or not heroes should be allowed to kill. The reason why they don't kill is because in the 30s, when the Utopian formed the Union of Heroes, it was decided that no hero should be allowed to kill. However, times have changed, and now the younger heroes are being killed off by the villains. This leaves the younger heroes questioning whether this code is proper to follow, since it puts their lives in greater risk. As such, they believe that they should be allowed to kill in self-defense. While the deaths of the younger heroes are a big deal to the characters in the story, the show does a terrible job of getting the audience invested in these side characters before they die. Most of the side characters that get killed off are only briefly in an episode or 2. This doesn't really give the audience time to become attached to these characters and mourn their loss. Instead, these deaths feel forgettable and you don't really know who died because they weren't really introduced all too well. This is part of a larger problem with the show, that being that there are far too many characters, and not enough time to properly develop all of them. Beyond the Samson family, none of the other characters really stand out all that much. Perhaps the worst aspect of this show is the constant flashbacks to the 30s. These show how the original 6 members of the Union gain their powers. And while this plot starts off interesting, with Sheldon having a mental breakdown and seeing visions of his father and a mysterious island, it quickly overstays its welcome. This mystery is ongoing throughout the season, and usually takes up about half of each episode. I feel like there should have just been 1 or 2 episodes and explained the full backstory there instead of constantly cutting to it throughout the series. On top of that, the payoff to them getting their powers was also fairly disappointing. Overall, I would not recommend watching this show unless you're already a fan of the source material. While the concepts this show present are interesting, they're overshadowed by a drawn-out origin story and just too many characters. The entire plot for this season felt like setup for something bigger to happen next season, so it would probably be better to just wait and see if this show gets another season before investing 7 hours into all this setup. Well, those are just my thoughts on Jupiter's Legacy. Are you a fan of the comics, or are you just discovering the series now? Let me know in the comments, and until next time, thanks for watching.